What do Hollywood millionaires the likes of John Travolta, Meryl Streep, Diane Keaton, Hugh Jackman, Taye Diggs, and Sarah Jessica Parker have in common? It's not just acting talent, but a love for the stage. All these stars got their start on Broadway before they went on to make names for themselves on the big screen. The theatre did not die along with Shakespeare in the 15th century, but has thrived since in many parts of the world, seen as a big economic and cultural contributor. Turnover from New York's famous Broadway shows also point to a growing industry. From about $95 million in the 2006-2007 season to $1.14 billion in 2012-2013. Locally, however, with the exception of rising star Donald Mulusi, who is making his presence felt on the international scene, we cannot point to much progress in the industry. No big production, no regular shows, and a steady employment for local thespians and related professions. What then is to become of the first batch of University of Botswana theatre graduates about to enter the working world? How receptive will the job market be to these practitioners of this little understood profession?
Go public school re rutile gore ditiro gore we were molded gore re bereke le government to some extent. Ditiro ke go nna soldier, go nna nurse, doctor, lawyer. And then when I got here, I found out gore somebody can go abroad go things like piano as a major, to do just liberal arts, motoira music as a major. And to me, those are hobbies. You can't work on your hobby. You can't go to university to study how to rap. And then I think those are some of the things that we should improve you, because people are actually making money right now. That's one of the things that go government school di bewa ekare o tshameke tsururu tlhala o repa mo o se go bala science go iragalang ka wena.
We sit down with a few of these students to hear what their expectations for life after their studies is and how they came about to choose the road less traveled. Welcome to First Issues. Welcome back to the show, as tonight we speak to soon-to-be performance art graduates from the University of Botswana to hear their views on the development and future of local theatre. Our guests this evening are Ellen Poko, Tshepo Kuche, and Tsirofatso Palagai. Their views as to why they chose to study theatre offers a valuable insight into the career education offered in this country.
I've always wanted to be on TV. But as I grew up, I was like, you know what, I think maybe I'd rather be behind the scenes of TV, because the production work seemed a lot more interesting than the people who are actually on TV. And from there I was like, let me study theatre and let me see what this is really all about.
I wanted to work in the industry, like the film and theatre industry, and I thought, how best can I do this? And then I thought, why don't I just do theatre and then move into the industry, the film industry. And I saw at the University of Botswana that they were offering it, and I applied, and they took me.
I had a gap year, and then I decided to apply. When I applied for fine arts. Well, I thought it was fine arts as in art, the whole painting, drawing thing. And then afterwards, and then I found out it was theatre, as in, performing and visual arts. And then I was like, okay, no, this is interesting, then let me give it a go. So that's how I got to study theatre.
Despite a generally negative outlook as to the current state of theatre in Botswana, our guests appear optimistic about their future. Tsirofatso believes this graduating class has the ability to set things in motion.
It's still dormant, really. There's a lot that can be improved, yeah, but there's also a lot of potential. I'm hopeful that the graduating group, the first group to graduate, will actually do something out there, which is better.
Right now, theatre is really not appreciated as much as it should be, but people are getting there. There are more theatre performances than there were 3 years ago. So I'm guessing Botswana are really appreciating theatre more and more. What we could use would be funding, because we don't have much funding this side. This is why it's very difficult for theatre productions to come up.
I think it can get there because I'm looking at initiatives like Mighty Song Festival, which gives directors, script writers and actors a chance to display their talent. There's this guy called, I think it's Donald Mulusi. He wrote Blue, Black and White. I saw it for the first time this year and I thought it was it's a very well scripted and directed play. So I think we could get there. It's just that we need support from people, support from the community, support from the government to get the theatre there,
We asked these young women what major development or change they feel could greatly improve their prospects for employment as soon-to-be graduates.
I think if more people studied it like we did, they would get more insight into how to make the theatre industry more interesting. Yeah, I definitely think that.
We need more theatre companies. They're already there, but they're not really advertising themselves the way they should be. So most people don't know much about those theatre companies that already exist. And I would also say marketing. As much as people try to market themselves, I don't think they're really doing a good job about it. Because you'll find that there's the Mighty Song Arts Festival, but not a lot of people know about it. And then the tickets are really expensive because they're trying to cover up their costs, but people don't know why they're expensive. So in terms of marketing wise, I think people could use with a bit of help here and there.
I think people that have experience in the industry I think they should be a bit more welcoming. They should give us a chance to learn from them.
On the issue of whether Botswana were receptive to this art form, Tsegofatso says a study she conducted in May this year proves there is a definite market for theatre production and shows. Tsepo, on the other hand, is not so convinced.
I was doing this other research on how best to get more followers, and I did a lot of research. People were saying we want to go to the theatres. A lot of people were saying, oh, I'll definitely go. And I think what we should do is, promotion-wise, we should definitely promote it better, because that's what most people were saying. They were saying, yeah, I would love to go to the theatres regularly, yes. But the problem is we don't know when there are theatre shows and stuff like that. I truly think it can be big.
To be honest, looking at the shows that I've attended that were theatrical, I think not a lot of Botswana are supportive, because you go to a show and then there are empty seats. So you're thinking, okay, wasn't this well advertised? Didn't people know about this show? So I think Botswana are not really supportive when it comes to theatre.
Having factored all this in, what now do our guests see as their future in theatre in Botswana?
I think I would like to contribute towards theatre. I would like to get Botswana, into the international market. I would love to go into filmmaking. I would love to write. I would love to direct. So just my aspirations are to grow the market when it comes to theatre. So I'm hoping that I, in a way, can contribute. And then, the upcoming generation can also learn from us as we learn from other people.
It's really hard to break through into the film industry in Botswana. I've approached a few companies, but I haven't had really much good response from them, because you find that they're short with, say, maybe the camera guy. But the camera guy is the editor, is the script writer, and they don't want to employ such people as us who've studied for things like this. So it's really difficult to break through into the industry. So hopefully, I think I'm going to try and start my own.
The more risk-averse viewer may be wondering why these young women chose to beat out a path for themselves in a less established career. We asked them why they choose to struggle instead of settling for a more traditional profession.
Passion, I guess. If you have the passion for it, you can't just work an 8-to-5 job and you're going to be very bored. Well, I personally feel if I want to do something, this is what I'm going to go to and this is what I'm going to work at no matter what.
I think with me, like I've always said, and I still believe that I'm a born creative. I don't want to be, I've studied this, yes, I have the knowledge of it all, but I don't think I'll just settle for any job because I want to pay bills, because I want to have a job, I just want to do this because this is something that I'm interested in. So I'm not just gonna give up and settle for whatever job is gonna be thrown my way.
As we part ways with our young panel, they share with us some encouraging words, making us think that it may just be well worth checking in on them in a few years to see what work they'll be doing to promote the performing arts.
It's a very interesting and fun field, but you have to be prepared to work just as hard as anybody out there, or even more harder.
I'll just say, just go out there and study it. Yeah, don't be afraid to study it. I just think it's best if you actually go to school for it.
It's not just about acting. If you're someone who loves writing, you can go into the theater because there's script writing. If you love directing, you can go into directing, producing, there's makeup, there's costume design. So it's not just about acting because you get to learn a whole lot of stuff. There's also stage management, scene design, so it's a whole lot. It's a very interesting subject, and I think people should give it a chance.
Good evening and welcome back to the show. As in this segment, we get to hear the half-year results of the Botswana Stock Exchange with the help, of course, of regular on the show, Mr. Dumisani Ntini. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Nameso.
Speaking of the half-year performance of the Stock Exchange, what has been witnessed with regards to index performance?
Firstly, let's start with the Domestic Company Index, the DCI, which is basically an indicator of the average trajectory or direction of the segment or subset of the domestic listed equities on the BSE. Now, the DCI is up 1.6% as at the 30th of June 2014, compared to an increase of 15.7% in the same period last year. The Foreign Company Index, however, is also on the positive side. It has increased 0.2% compared to a decline in the first half of 2013 of 1.2%. So we're definitely seeing some signs of recovery for the foreign listings on our local bourse in the first half this year.
But a slight decline in momentum there with regards to domestic indices.
Yes, quite certainly. It's still on the upward trend, however, not at the same magnitude that it had last year, but it's still on the positive side, definitely.
Now at this half-year mark, where does the Botswana Stock Exchange stand with regards to liquidity?
Right, it's definitely quite pleasing to note that turnover for the first half of 2014 actually stood at 1.2 billion pula compared to 976.1 million pula as at the end of June last year. On average, the BSE has traded approximately 9.3 million pula worth of shares every single trading day, compared to only 7.2 million pula as the daily average for the first half of 2013. So these figures are definitely quite indicative of a more liquid and more active first half of 2014 than we saw last year.
Sounds like good news.
Definitely.
Where do we stand with a market capitalization?
All right, market capitalization, which is basically the total value of listed equities that accrues to shareholders at the end of the day. With market capitalization, the total market cap as at the end of the second quarter of this year stood at 418.2 billion pula compared to 414.2 billion pula in the corresponding quarter last year. So it's definitely an upward trajectory for the market capitalization.
Exchange traded funds, what are we witnessing there?
As you know, Namitso, we have two listed exchange traded funds, or ETFs, here on the Botswana Stock Exchange. The first one being the New Gold ETF, which tracks the price of gold, and the second one being the Better Beta ETF, which is simply a composition or collection of the shares of the top 40 performing JSE listed companies, JSE being the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So the shares of those top 40 performing companies have been combined and sold as one unit to investors. So we'll start with the New Gold ETF. It was a bit of a slow quarter for the New Gold ETF. It traded a total turnover of 388,000 pula in comparison to 104.2 million in the same quarter last year. However, we should note that the Better Beta ETF was definitely on the positive side. It received a lot of investor preference during this quarter. It traded 60.2 million pula. That was the turnover generated by the Better Beta ETF as at the end of quarter 2 2014, compared to only 332,000 in terms of turnover in quarter 2 of 2013. So definitely positive figures, plausible figures there for the Better Beta ETF.
And finally, could you tell us as to the liquidity indicators for bond market?
All right, with regards to Botswana's fixed income security market or bond market, as at the end of quarter 2 2014, there were 6 government bonds, 4 quasi-government bonds, and 25 corporate bonds listed on the BSE, which brings the total to 35. The market capitalization of which stood at 9.6 billion pula as at the 30th of June 2014. Now, in terms of trade statistics for the fixed income market, total turnover generated by the trade of bonds during the quarter was 266.6 million pula, compared to only 31.7 million pula in the corresponding quarter of 2014. So we've definitely seen an uptick in activity, a lot more activity and liquidity in Botswana's fixed income security market for this quarter compared to that quarter of 2013.
Okay, before I do let you go, I'd like to know, maybe other viewers watching at home, with regards to the performance of things like New Gold, were there any external factors or extenuating factors that contributed to the slowdown in its performance?
Generally, since the beginning of the year, there's been an average decline in the price of the gold bullion. So, I mean, you will remember that the New Gold ETF tracks the price of the gold bullion, and generally, investors have been shying away from gold as an asset generally. So, we might attribute that to the lower amount of trades that we've seen with regard to the New Gold ETF.
What are the contributing factors to this decline in the growth of the New Gold ETF?
Okay, there's definitely quite a number of reasons why the New Gold ETF has experienced a bit less liquidity than it usually does. Not necessarily because there's something or anything wrong with the gold bullion itself. However, let's remember that investors tend to favor gold because it's what we call a safe asset or an inflation hedge. Now, we need to understand that with the advent of the recession, well, as we get into 2014 and the years thereafter, a lot of economies are actually recovering from the recession. So investors are prone or willing to take more risk than they would, and that's why it seems as if they are shying away from gold as an asset in general.
So it's still one of the better bets.
Definitely, it's always good to have a diversified portfolio where you have both safe and risky assets.
We end our show on this note tonight, but when we return next week, we look at the value of diversifying the tourist offering within a country and fully capitalizing on tourist traffic. We saw London atop Bangkok and Paris this year as the most visited city by offering a more diversified tourist offering. 18.7 million international visitors are expected to flock to the city this year to attend exhibitions, visit royal palaces, dine at Michelin-starred restaurants, and watch world-class sporting events. And we here at First Issues therefore look into the tourism potential of the growing Botswana International Air and Motor Show, which was held this Saturday at the Matsieng Airstrip. Can we possibly aspire to the $254.5 million contributed by the Singapore Air Show to Singapore's economy in 2012? We talk to various stakeholders next week to get the full picture.
In 2009, we started with first as a fundraiser for our church a flying safari in Botswana, which consisted every year of 7 days going to various venues and safari lodges and camps in Botswana.
For me, it's about inspiring people and putting airplanes up in the sky is something that kids look up to and people look up to. And
I think in years to come, customers and stakeholders out there should actually see a bigger and a better international show.
But it's actually about having a good time with other pilots and inspiring communities together, and we move together from one air show to another.
We want to turn this international motor and air show into an international event. As you might have seen, there are roughly about 50 aircrafts around. We're actually targeting the suppliers, we're targeting the dealers, we're actually targeting our own customers that are interested in these little toys. So what we want to see is a growth in terms of the assets or the aircrafts that we finance. So we feel this presents us with an opportunity for growth.
And then in 2012, we've decided, why don't we start with a fly day? I mean, we've got the facilities here and it has grown beyond expectation. You know, the first year it was excellent, the second year bigger, and this year even bigger.
I think in years to come, customers and stakeholders out there should actually see a bigger and a better international show.
If you go to bigger air shows, I mean, you can't even, all aircraft, you know, there's a perimeter fence, you can just barely see it, you can't touch it, you can't speak to the people who are flying it. What is nice here, it's a good interaction. And you're in between aeroplanes, you can walk around, you can look at them, you can hear them, you can see them. I think that is the difference.
Feel free to share with us your views and opinions on the issues presented on tonight's program on both our Facebook and YouTube pages. From me, Nametso Sibina, the team behind First Issues, and our sponsors, First National Bank, we wish you a good night and pleasant viewing.